And welcome back to the Warrior Creed live stream with me, the Radical, Majid Nawaz. And today's topic is the by now globally recognized story of the Epstein files. And as you should be able to see on your screens in just a moment, we're going to give you the update on everything related to Lord Mandelson and Prince Andrew in the UK and the Epstein files and how such files relate to them and what the latest is with those files. The title should be on your screens now. Epstein Files, The Prince and the Dark Prince Fall. PM Starmer is next. That is the topic for today's stream. And as you can see with the graphic that should be on your screens right about now, very clear and very direct. Not one single person who paid to rape children on Epstein's Island has been arrested. Now, what we're going to do over the course of this stream is keeping in mind that graphic and keeping in mind the topic for today's stream, which is, as is on your screens now, the Epstein files, the Prince and the Dark Prince Fall. PM Starmer is next. We're going to break down for you everything that these Epstein files imply and explain exactly why it is that Lord Peter Mandelson, who has now had to resign his whip, in other words, his membership of the Labour Party, but as of time of airing, still remains a member of the House of Lords, though a vote is due to take place to bring in legislation, in fact, to strip him of that title. The implications of this story are huge. They cannot be overstated. Just precisely the moment that we're in right now and the implications for this will reverberate across the world and more than just one country. Those reverberations are already being felt. We're going to go into some of that over the course of this stream. We're also going to explain why it is that Prime Minister Keir Starmer seemed to have been so unable to resist the urge to promote Lord Mandelson up until he took the position of perhaps the country's most sensitive diplomatic post, and that is the British ambassador to Washington, D.C. Why, despite having been warned against the fact that Mandelson had received security clearance by the MI6, Britain's security or secret intelligence service, had refused to clear Peter Mandelson through a vetting process. He did not pass his vetting process according to the SIS, or the Secret Intelligence Service, formerly known as MI6. And yet, despite that, Keir Starmer continued to promote Lord Mandelson to make him the British ambassador to Washington, D.C. Keir Starmer isn't the only prime minister that had a compromised role with Lord Mandelson. We're going to take you back to how Lord Mandelson facilitated a meeting between the disgraced and convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein and Prime Minister Tony Blair in at the residence of Downing Street, one time at least that we know of. And from Blair, we know that Mandelson communicated with Epstein in advance by telling Epstein that he was getting rid, quote, of Prime Minister Gordon Brown, who came into office after Tony Blair. And now, of course, the relationship that he has with Prime Minister Keir Starmer that is being scrutinized by everybody across the board. What we're going to do over the course of this stream is break down for everybody precisely what Lord Mandelson, the Epstein friend Lord Mandelson, what the nature of his relationship is with Prime Minister Keir Starmer, the nature of the relationship in essence being one of compromise and blackmail and involving a VIP, global VIP paedophile underage rape, quote unquote, grooming gang. But the point being that Keir Starmer's seeming inability to distance himself from Lord Mandelson until it was too late points to some form of dark influence that Mandelson had over Starmer, and we're going to be breaking down exactly what that dark influence was, what it was informed by, and what Keir Starmer is hiding. And we're going to explain precisely how this story, the huge Epstein story connected to Lord Mandelson and Prince Andrew in the UK as it is, will lead to the fall of this Prime Minister Keir Starmer, but not only to the fall of Keir Starmer, but will lead to a lot more. We're going to explain all of that as succinctly as we can over the course of this Warrior Creed live stream. But as usual, all the receipts for everything we say will be published in tomorrow's written version of this stream, The Radical Dispatch, available via Radical Media. If you go to majidnawaz.substack.com and find Radical Media there. For subscribers, you will also get, in addition to the free Radical Dispatch, behind the paywall content that will help you further corroborate every single name that you may be interested in corroborating that comes up in the Epstein files by providing for you the resources to be able to do the research yourselves through searchable databases that already exist through corporate media platforms online that you are able to then go to and search corroborating information on any name that you feel that you need to search for that has come up in the Epstein files. So all of that will be in the written version of the Radical Dispatch tomorrow, the corroborating evidence with links for our paying premium subscribers, but the free Radical Dispatch breaking down today's stream will also be available for free for all our free subscribers. Do go to majidnawaz.substack.com and find Radical Media to be able to access these resources and do the critical work for yourselves so that you're not simply blind following any one media platform, not least us here at Radical Media either. The purpose is that you are able to look at the receipts for yourselves and come to your own conclusions about this, the global VIP underage rape pedophile grooming gang known as the Epstein Mossad blackmail operation, and all of the implications of this huge story. As we say in today's stream, we're going to focus specifically on what it means for Prime Minister Keir Starmer next, and all of that is coming up in today's Warrior Creed just after this. So stay with us, and we're coming straight back after these the introductory music.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength of street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.
Warrior Creed live stream with me, the Radical Majid Nawaz. And as you can see on your screens right about here, you should be able to see the cartoon, the political cartoon for today's stream. Not one single person who paid to rape children on Epstein's Island has been arrested. And we're going to come to some of those names in a moment. These are otherwise known colloquially as the clients list or the clients of Epstein. In other words, how is it that Ghislaine Maxwell appears to be the only human being ever to have been convicted for trafficking or facilitating the trafficking of underage girls to absolutely nobody? Who are the people that Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted for trafficking underage girls to? These are otherwise known as the clients. Now, the stream's going to go into some of that, but we'll go into a lot more names that you can corroborate for yourselves in tomorrow's Radical Dispatch. But for the moment, in today's stream, we'd like to focus on the two princes. That is the Prince and the Dark Prince, Prince Andrew, and the Dark Prince, Lord Mandelson, who's actually known as the Dark Prince in the 90s under the premiership of Tony Blair, because he was Tony Blair's spin doctor and chief enforcer. Now we understand, in hindsight, no doubt our regulars will have clocked this already, that what was the information and the networks he was using to enforce against Tony Blair's adversaries and even allies would have been all the information that's come out now, and that is the Epstein network. Clearly, Lord Mandelson had access to information that he was able to then use to blackmail or otherwise coerce people to obey Tony Blair or any other prime minister of his choosing, in this case, Keir Starmer. So today's stream is going to be discussing the Prince, the Dark Prince, and who's next. Of course, we know the Prince, formerly known as the Prince Andrew. He's already been exposed. There is no other word really to use or to choose in this instance. He really, truly, well and truly has been exposed to the world. But so has the Dark Prince Mandelson. But Keir Starmer is next, because Keir Starmer, and the big question is, why, despite all of us knowing exactly what Mandelson had been up to, did Keir Starmer feel it appropriate to continue to promote Lord Mandelson? Now, we'll begin by stating for our regulars what they already know. This is us on the 10th of April 2023, stating, that's 2 years ago, stating the following. And we said, accompanying that reminder, not looking so crazy now, are we? What we're referring to is our old post there from the 10th of April 2023 that says, we are ruled over by a class of pathetic parasites who are easily controlled through compromise and blackmail by a global cabal of psychopaths who facilitate their depravity in exchange for control. We've also said there that every single one of them will be exposed. And this clearly from 2 years ago is what we were talking about. We are coming, it ends there, because we are obviously here. And every single one of them is being exposed live right before your very eyes. Let's start with Prince Andrew. And as you can see on your screens now, we referred to Andrew and Follow the Evidence in a Radical Media dispatch from the 22nd of October, 2025, headlined Epstein's VIP blackmail ring, Prince Andrew, Lord Mandelson, PM Blair, PM Starmer, grooming gangs, PM Barack of Israel, Middle East war, Follow the Evidence. Now, you can go back to that stream from tomorrow's dispatch to read all of that, but the point is, it's just from the headline, it's very clear now what Follow the Evidence meant, because by now, with everything that corporate media is beginning to address on this topic, you should already be able to see the link between Blair, Starmer, Mandelson, Epstein, and of course, foreign policy. But it wasn't just foreign policy, it turns out. It was a lot more, including domestic policy and money, which we're going to come to as well. But all of that is tied together by to Epstein in the UK by one key player. And the key takeaway here is that the key player for the common man, if you like, House of Commons, right, was the Dark Prince, Peter Mandelson, now Lord Mandelson. And the key player for Epstein in the UK for not the common man, but the aristocracy, appears to have been the former Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. So those were the two key men that Epstein appears to have had as henchmen in the UK, the Prince and the Dark Prince. The Prince, formerly Prince Andrew, would have been Epstein's crucial VIP networker for the moving in the British aristocratic circles. And of course, PT, Lord Mandelson, would have been Epstein's key man, the Dark Prince in this instance, to move among the commoners via the House of Commons. So that's probably how Epstein envisaged those two. And we're going to break down for you some of that in this stream. But as we say, the Radical Dispatch title that's on your screens now, that goes through it in a lot of detail, which we're not going to go to now. We're just going to give you some of the highlights because of the recent breaking news. So, of course, we'll begin with the Prince, not the Dark Prince, because this is an easy one. The Prince, formerly known as Andrew, is quite obviously embroiled in all of this, and that is no longer in dispute. But what this particular file drop did, the third big Epstein file drop, is it exposed some new photographs that were incredibly creepy of the former Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. As you can see there on your screens, we've said vindication for everything that we have been saying will come so powerfully that few will be able to deny it. We are coming. And what we're referring to there is a post by a user, Return of Cappy, Isaac's Army, saying Prince Andrew tortured and then had the female victim murdered, according to the new Epstein file dump. Now, they've published the email leaks from that. It is incredibly dark. Just so you're in no doubt, because, of course, it sounds surreal, but we assure you, and our regulars will know this, that if you've been following up until this point, and we've been addressing this topic now for over 3 years, you will have been expecting this, as dark as it has turned. But for those who are joining us new, bear with us. A lot of this you'll be able to explore for yourselves in the written version of this stream in the Radical Dispatch tomorrow, and you'll be able to follow all the links. We hyperlink everything. You'll be able to follow all the evidence for yourselves. Do not take anyone's word for everything. Corroborate everything, cross all your T's, dot all your I's, and always corroborate the names that come up. Because before we begin this stream, it would behoove us to say the mere mention of your name in any one of the evidential files kept by Epstein, whether in his black book, whether in his flight logs, whether noted to have visited his homes, in any one or any version of the evidentiary files kept by Epstein in his calendar, for example, if your name appears in those, then of course that name must be corroborated. So for all of you who have seen names, do remember they must be corroborated, and we will publish links to various searchable databases as to exactly how you can cross-reference and corroborate those names to make sure that you know who was merely in his address book versus who actually visited the island, and who Elon Musk was begging to visit the island, but as of yet appears to have not necessarily succeeded in pleading Epstein to let him visit the wild parties on the island. All of that you'll be able to corroborate yourselves. For the moment, though, suffice to say, you can see on your screens, this is Andrew in a new and incredibly creepy photograph, appearing to lean over a young woman, we don't know, who appears immobilized with her arms splayed out to her side. And the former Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor appears quite predatory, leaning over her in that way. And that is next to an email with victims' names redacted, describing allegations through official police reports. These weren't the tips. One thing to keep in mind when looking through these files, anonymous tips to law enforcement agencies through hotlines are perhaps one of the least reliable ways to corroborate evidence. So do keep that in mind when you see a lot of the files with names that are released, and all they are really is anonymous members of the public during election season calling into FBI hotlines, naming one politician or another to score their own points against those politicians. That's one of the weakest versions of corroborating evidence. This isn't that. What you're seeing on your screens is in fact email, not an anonymous tip from the public, email between law enforcement agencies, making the allegation that one of the witnesses under interview said that the former Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was guilty of torture and ordering the murder of a victim. So that is for the Prince. And it continues because matters have escalated to such an extent that, as the BBC reports on the 31st of January, that's on your screens now, off the back of those new images, the BBC reports that Starmer suggests Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the former prince, should testify to the US Congress after new photos of Epstein files, the new photos in the Epstein files. So that is quite a serious matter, because the question remains exactly what Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the former prince, was doing, leaning over that apparent victim in that manner, the victim appearing immobilized as she does, and exactly who that victim was. And was it Virginia Guthrie, who has since is no longer with us, but was one of the most vocal accusers against the former Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Now, the online users have noted on the subject of torture, a lot more exists in those files. And here is one again with the name redacted. Somebody wrote an email to Jeffrey Epstein saying, "Where are you? Are you okay? I loved the torture video." And War Monitor Online says, "Release the name of this sender." So you can see how it turned pretty dark pretty quickly. And by the way, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We are deliberately not going into some of the more graphic descriptions because we don't feel we need to make the point that this is really dark web stuff that Epstein was involved in, allegedly with some of the names that we're going through today in this stream. So, of course, as the BBC notes, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has a lot to answer to and should perhaps go to Congress to testify. But moving on now to really the bulk of our show today, and that is the relationship between Lord Peter Mandelson, known as the Dark Prince. We're leaving the Prince behind, moving to the Dark Prince. The relationship between Lord Peter Mandelson, of course, we know existed between him and Epstein, but the triangle is not complete without recognizing that the reason Epstein kept Peter Mandelson on such good terms is so that he can have access to successive prime ministers in Britain. Now, we'll remind you, our regulars will know this anyway, but here you can see on your screens that back in February 2025, that's a year ago, we on the Radical Dispatch published the headline that you see on your screens there. Epstein suspect Lord Mandelson confirmed as UK ambassador to the US. You can see the date, the 12th of February 2025. Fast forward to today, and of course, as the Financial Times reports, that's on your screens, Peter Mandelson leaked a sensitive UK government document to Jeffrey Epstein while he was business secretary that proposed 20 billion of asset sales and revealed Labour's tax policy plans. So what this demonstrates is interesting. It demonstrates that really the reason that Jeffrey Epstein wanted Mandelson around was for access to confidential UK government information in advance via successive prime ministers that the Dark Prince, Mandelson, had a hand in bringing to power. So that is the setup. And that's why we're saying to you that Keir Starmer is next, because Keir Starmer was one of these prime ministers that Mandelson clearly had a hold over. And clearly that's what explains Starmer's Starmer's insistence on promoting Mandelson, despite being warned even by MI6 that he didn't pass security vetting. So that's what explains it, because Mandelson appears to have had some form of unholy influence over Starmer, and that's why we say Starmer is next. But to demonstrate that point, we're just going to go through some of the examples of where Lord Mandelson leaked information to Epstein from government to demonstrate the point that the reason Epstein kept Mandelson as a friend was to gain compromising information or information in advance that he should not have had access to from the British government and successive prime ministers. And that information was secured because of the way that Mandelson was able to coerce people to do his bidding, because he had compromising information on them. And this stream will break all of that down. So that was the Financial Times article explaining that 20 billion of asset sales that was proposed. That information was leaked to Epstein by Mandelson when in government. But it began with this. You can see on your screens, the BBC reports that Epstein sent £10,000 to Mandelson's partner, according to released emails. But it got worse. As the Daily Mirror reports on the 31st of January, it wasn't just to Mandelson's partner that Epstein sent money, but as the Daily Mirror reports, exclusive, Peter Mandelson, pictured half-dressed in Epstein files, as papers show, pedo gave Peer $50,000. So it then was revealed that it wasn't just to Mandelson's partner, that gay partner that Epstein sent money to, but indeed sent 50,000 directly to Mandelson as well. What was he paying them for, if not information? To carry on, then Sky News reported, breaking, Lord Mandelson has been accused of giving disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein advance notice of a 500 billion EU bank bailout in 2010. That is incredible. And again, demonstrating that the purpose of the relationship was blackmail and compromising information. That demonstrates it very clearly. It's on your screens now. Sky News, breaking news, Lord Mandelson has been accused of giving disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein advance notice of 500 billion in EU bank bailout in 2020. So you can see a picture building. Information was being given, and then money was being exchanged in return. But it continues. That scandal led, of course, as it was being revealed, to Lord Mandelson, who up until now was still a member of the House of Lords and still a member of the Labour Party, officially advising, by the way, Keir Starmer, with the official position of advising the Prime Minister. As this all broke, of course, Mandelson had no choice but to leave the Labour Party. And here is Sky News reporting that information.
Mandelson has resigned his membership from the Labour Party. That coming into us now. There is no further lines on that. Lord Mandelson said he's resigned from his membership. He doesn't wish to cause further embarrassment over his links to Jeffrey Epstein.
So the reasons given were that he doesn't want to cause further embarrassment, but of course, further embarrassment continued to come. The Daily Mail then started to report the following. Former US Ambassador Peter Mandelson pictured in the Epstein files standing in his underpants in pedophile finance's home. Quite literally, as you can see on your screens, Mandelson was caught with his pants down. And there is the photograph, verified by fact checkers at Sky News to be Epstein's Paris mansion, where Mandelson went to celebrate Epstein's birthday with him after his conviction. So there it is, Mandelson caught with his pants down, quite literally and figuratively, and matters continued to get worse for him. And of course, then all of his friends began abandoning him. And we begin with Trevor Phillips, a broadcaster on Sky News, and we're going to play you his statement. Before we do, at this stage, we should like to explain to everybody that we know Trevor Phillips, as we know some of the other characters in this orbit, like Tony Blair, having advised on counter-extremism multiple individuals over the course of 15 years on the global global jihadist insurgency and how to counter it. Now, we introduced that only to say the following, and that is that I personally went to some of these people, not to Trevor, but to some others a year ago and later, warning them of Peter Mandelson and warning people that they should stay away from this man because he was bad news. And as you'd expect, and as our regulars would predict, people did not heed that warning. And here we are. Trevor, I wish you had contacted me. You would have saved yourself some embarrassment, the same embarrassment that you're now suggesting that Lord Mandelson is feeling. Perhaps as his friend, as you admit in this video, you could have contacted me as your friend to gain an understanding or a debrief, considering that we used to present on Sky News The Pledge together, and you have my number. Nevertheless, Trevor Phillips, this is what you had to say about your association with Peter Mandelson.
Welcome to Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. Peter Mandelson and I met for the first time almost exactly 50 years ago on a march protesting against apartheid. It's no secret here in Westminster that over the following 3 decades, he and I worked together, first as student activists, then as television journalists, and as elected politicians. He's appeared more than once on this programme. We were, and are still, friends. His political career was long and illustrious. Mine was brief and disastrous. It's a friend's privilege to tell you that you are ill-suited to a role, even that you are a complete idiot. 20 years ago, Peter was honest enough to make it clear to me that my lack of tact and distaste for compromise meant that I'd be better suited to journalism than party politics. I have not spoken personally to Lord Mandelson about the release this weekend of documents, messages, photographs and videos related to the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. He was invited to join us this morning, but declined. However, he has told this programme that neither he nor his husband, Ronaldo Avila da Silva, has any record or recollection of receiving payments in 2003 or 2004, or knows whether the documentation is authentic. He does accept that Ronaldo received a loan of $10,000 from Epstein whilst he, Mandelson, was a senior cabinet minister. And he acknowledges that in the same period, Epstein was amongst those who lobbied him on important policy matters. There's no suggestion that Lord Mandelson's done anything unlawful, but I would claim the friend's privilege to tell Peter that he has been, at best, naive and foolish, at worst, greedy and duplicitous. Whatever is true, as far as politics and public office are concerned, for Peter Mandelson, this is the end. The question now is whether the price of his misjudgment is to be paid only by the man himself, or whether those who trusted him and elevated him to the peerage and to one of the highest diplomatic posts available should also share in his ignominy.
All we really would like to say at this stage to our dear friend Trevor Phillips is we only wish, Trevor, it's a friend's prerogative to say we only wish you had not been so naive. at best in befriending this man, considering for over a year we've been warning specifically about Mandelson's relationship with Epstein. And you know exactly how to get hold of me. So, on that theme, we're going to carry on as to exactly how things started to go downhill from there for Mandelson and all those who began defending him. And as the next user here, Ross Kemple, notes, even the BBC now wants some of the action. Though, of course, had been prior to this in trying to position Mandelson in a favourable light. You can see on your screens there, Ross Kemple saying, okay, this is in response to a BBC News article headlined, Epstein sent $75,000 to accounts linked to Mandelson, files suggest. And Ross Kemple says, okay, but barely 3 weeks ago, you put him on your flagship political programme and gave him a softball interview, barely touching on these matters, and instead ask a load of questions about geopolitical this and that. Tell us your big thoughts. So clearly, even the BBC now having to backtrack from previously being associated with this man. And here it is, Channel 4, describing, reminding everybody how Mandelson was known as the Dark Prince. In the description there, you can see it. He was nicknamed the Prince of Darkness for his reputation as a ruthless, behind-the-scenes fixer for New Labour. Now, Lord Mandelson has resigned from the party to save it, quote, further embarrassment after new revelations on the Epstein files. And that summary of events we'll just play for you because it is a decent summary of everything that's happened to now.
If Keir Starmer thought today was going to be an opportunity to sell the benefits of his trip to China, fate had other ideas. 7 months after installing Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the United States, Keir Starmer sacked him over his connections to the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Today, as even more compromising messages between the two were revealed, Keir Starmer handed out still more punishment.
As the House knows, Peter Mandelson is no longer a member of the Labour Party, having resigned his membership last night, and the House may wish to know that disciplinary action was underway by the Labour Party prior to his resignation. The Prime Minister believes, as does the government, that Peter Mandelson should not retain his membership of the House of Lords or use his title.
For Ronaldo and me to be here, it's literally a dream come true.
That last great job in government has turned into a nightmare. A special bill could now be rushed through Parliament to strip Peter Mandelson and future peers who fall into disrepute of their titles. The leaks of inside information to Jeffrey Epstein carried on into the last hours of his ministerial career after the 2010 general election. Peter Mandelson tipped off Jeffrey Epstein that he'd persuaded Gordon Brown he didn't have enough MPs to form a government. And he revealed to Jeffrey Epstein that a €500 billion bank bailout was about to be announced. Much contact had preceded that. In 2009, Peter Mandelson forwarded to Jeffrey Epstein an interesting note that's gone to the Prime Minister. It contained market-sensitive information which included a proposed asset sales plan. What saleable assets? Epstein asks. Land, property, I guess, Mandelson responds. A few weeks later, a highly market-sensitive analysis of lending by the Prime Minister's top city advisor was forwarded to Jeffrey Epstein almost the moment it arrived in the conduit's inbox. The evidence suggests the sender with the redacted email was again Peter Mandelson.
Within 4 seconds of that reply, someone forwarded it to Jeffrey Epstein. Can't see their name, they're redacted. We can see the redacted name is the same length as Peter Mandelson's redacted name. We can see it's from a device with the same default signature and the same time setting. It's incorrectly set to not British summertime, even though it was the summer. And those are characteristics of Peter Mandelson's BlackBerry.
In December, Peter Mandelson helps out with lobbying against the banker's bonus tax, being brought in by Alistair Darling, then the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Epstein asks, should Jamie Dimon, boss of JP Morgan, a bank Epstein worked with, call Darling one more time? Mandelson replies, yes, and mildly threaten. The advice was followed, and the threat to scrap a London HQ plan was made when Jamie Dimon called Alistair Darling a few days later, as recommended by Alistair Darling's fellow cabinet minister.
I'm shocked. I mean, I've never heard anything like it before. It seems extraordinary behaviour. It's breaching confidences, it's breaching trust, it's letting down your colleagues. I mean, it is a great betrayal.
A few months later, when Peter Mandelson is forwarded detailed minutes of a meeting between Chancellor Alistair Darling and US government advisor Larry Summers on banking reform, he pings them off to Jeffrey Epstein, begging what becomes a bit of a catchphrase: please protect. Epstein then appears to make detailed drafting suggestions on financial services legislation.
I mean, I did see it. I mean, it is, I don't think I've got the vocabulary to describe how shocking it is, the breaches of confidence that were taking place. Alistair Darling certainly had no idea that this was happening.
Within a few weeks, Jeffrey Epstein began payments to Peter Mandelson's partner, Ronaldo da Silva, now his husband. $4,000 a month, which appears to have continued for 3 months.
When I go to the pub, I buy my friends beers, and they buy me beers. And there was never a signed agreement to buy beers in exchange for each other. We never even discussed that I'll buy you a beer, then you'll buy me a beer. But it's clearly socially accepted. It's how pubs work. I think it was socially accepted between Mr. Epstein and the people he corresponded with, including Peter Mandelson, that you got something for something, and that access went one way and money went the other way. And that's what we're seeing happening here.
The Epstein files suggest $75,000 had been paid over a few years earlier. Lord Mandelson said in a weekend statement he didn't recall such payments. The insider tip-offs would be bad enough to any outside contact, but Peter Mandelson's old friend Jeffrey Epstein had only recently been convicted of procuring a child for prostitution. The co-architect of New Labour has said in previous statements he regretted taking Jeffrey Epstein at his word. As more and more contacts emerged today, there were no words from Lord Mandelson.
And as you can all see there, that is a damning report that really goes into some of the detail as to exactly what Mandelson is accused of in terms of compromising the national security of the United Kingdom by handing information over to a convicted paedophile who also happened to be a intelligence operative working a global VIP blackmail ring involving underage girls and trafficking. It is a real scandal, probably one of the worst scandals in political history. We're living through it, so it may not feel as bad as it actually is, but it is really bad. And that led to MPs such as the former Conservative, now Reform Member of Parliament, Robert Jenrick, saying that Mandelson should be in the dock because these are, in fact, criminal offences. We're just going to play for you Robert Jenrick's speech here now.
Peter Mandelson to our Premier Ambassadorship was always a grotesque error of judgment by the Prime Minister, given everything that we knew about this man. And now we're told that this man leaked confidential information to a convicted sex offender when he was a cabinet minister and took tens of thousands of pounds in secret backhanders. It is a total disgrace. Is the minister really coming to the House today to say that he neither intends to bring forward primary legislation to deal with this now, but will write to the House of Lords and seek their support to modernise their procedures in a month's time, and nor will he go proactively to the police and demand an investigation when Peter Mandelson has clearly broken the law and stands now accused of serious misconduct in a public office and should be tried for his offences. Pointing Peter.
And of course, Robert Jenrick is correct. These do appear to be serious criminal offences. We say the word appear to, of course, off the face of the evidence as we have been presented. It is ultimately a matter for the law to decide, but it does appear to us to be some serious criminal offences that at the very least, the Lord, member of the House of Lords, Lord Peter Mandelson, should be compelled to testify to under oath at risk of perjury as to exactly what's gone on here. There should be a police investigation. Members of the House of Lords should not be allowed to bring their government, their legislative chamber into such disrepute. And of course, that is the topic that Robert Jenrick suggested. There is something that the police have since said that they will take on board. Reuters reports that the UK police have said that they will review reports of alleged misconduct by Mandelson after the release of the Epstein files. But it doesn't stop there. It's been a particularly bad day for Mandelson, and it's about to get to become an even worse day for Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister that Mandelson is close to, because as more and more gets revealed, it is looking more and more like Keir Starmer will have absolutely no choice but to rat on Mandelson to the police, because we're talking of criminal offences here. As you can see on your screens now, the Guido political blog reports, this is a well-known UK political blog, it reports an exclusive: Epstein files reveal that Labour used code names to avoid freedom of information laws. Labour's secret transparency dodge. So there's Mandelson using code names to communicate about Gordon Brown and others. Keir Starmer is going to have very little choice but to rat on Mandelson because of the fact that these would involve criminal offences, and Starmer himself is at risk of being investigated because of these criminal offences. And as you can see there on your screens, Politics UK reporting some developments on the Westminster angle of this story that we're just going to read for you. Breaking: Keir Starmer has given the police evidence of Peter Mandelson allegedly leaking confidential government information. The evidence includes unredacted emails containing sensitive economic information sent by Mandelson to Jeffrey Epstein. It is unbelievable, but it does appear to be the case that the Prime Minister is now sending police evidence in the form of emails against his own advisor and member of the House of Lords, Lord Mandelson. You can see that on your screens. It continues to say, Keir Starmer has asked for legislation to remove Peter Mandelson from the Lords to be drawn up, quote, as soon as possible. So Starmer now also backing the idea that Lord Mandelson should have his peerage stripped from him, even though he's left the Labour Party, to strip the title Lord from him. And Starmer is sending in information to the police that could potentially help with their criminal investigation. And a vote takes place tomorrow. And Politics UK reports on your screens now, Labour MPs are set to rebel and vote in favour of a Tory motion tomorrow, mandating the disclosure of government documents related to Peter Mandelson. So Labour MPs are set to rebel and vote against Mandelson. Starmer will have no choice. And it says here in the last Politics UK post there, Labour MPs believe Number 10 is unlikely to whip against the vote due to fears of a rebellion. Starmer will have no choice but to comply. Keep in mind, because this is potentially a criminal offence, he will have no choice but to even personally comply. They say the best hope, it says in Politics UK, for Number 10 is that the motion is imprecisely worded and there is no subsequent substantial disclosure. That would be their best hope. But I think matters are beyond that now. It's got to a point where Keir Starmer himself is cooperating with the police on Mandelson, because it does appear to be the case that criminal offences were committed. Why is this topic so important? What we're going to show is that, as we stated at the beginning, Lord Mandelson provided Epstein acted for Epstein as the conduit between Epstein and British political circles. So the Prince of Darkness, or Dark Prince Mandelson, was Epstein's conduit for the layman, or the House of Commons. And the Prince, or formerly known as Prince Andrew, was Epstein's conduit for the upper echelons, or aristocracy. So that's what it appears to be, the structure. And with that in mind, we're going to demonstrate how Mandelson was communicating with Epstein over the course of at least 3 prime ministers, at least. All right? And his attitude towards each of these, you could probably predict if you knew UK politics well enough, and you knew that the purpose of this black whale was to coerce politicians over whom Mandelson had this information to do the bidding of his bosses, it appears, like Epstein, in things such as providing information on tax policy, but even beyond that, on foreign policy as well. And so let's start with this, and that is the Epstein, Mandelson, and Prime Minister Tony Blair connection. It starts there because the rise of Mandelson was with the rise of New Labour and Tony Blair being New Labour's first Prime Minister. On the 22nd of October 2025, we report in Radical Media that the dispatch that is on your screens here, headlined Epstein's VIP blackmail ring, Prince Andrew, Lord Mandelson, Prime Minister Blair, Prime Minister Starmer, grooming gangs, Prime Minister Barak of Israel, Middle East war, follow the evidence. So we already laid it all out for you in that dispatch, and we're just going to read an extract from that, because in there we mentioned Tony Blair. And what you can see on your screens there, we've said, is it any wonder then that even former Prime Minister Tony Blair, who launched Britain's ill-fated invasion of Iraq, was made to meet with Epstein in Downing Street at none other than Lord Mandelson's request? And there is an article on your screens now from the BBC, dated 10th of October 2025, headlined, Tony Blair met Jeffrey Epstein while Prime Minister. There it is on your screens. We're going to blow it up for you so you can see it for yourselves. And that meeting was facilitated by none other than Lord Mandelson. And we'll read the extract for you there. That extract should be on your screens now. Tony Blair met with Jeffrey Epstein in Downing Street while still Prime Minister, following lobbying by Lord Peter Mandelson, the BBC has confirmed. Emails seen by BBC News show Lord Mandelson pushed for the meeting, telling Sir Tony's Chief of Staff, Jonathan Powell, that Epstein was, quote, a friend of mine, who ex-US President Bill Clinton hoped to introduce to the Prime Minister. Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear. So that was Tony Blair and how Mandelson acted as the conduit to introduce people like Epstein to the first Prime Minister that was in his orbit, and that was Tony Blair. But Mandelson didn't stop there. And this is why this story is so bloody important, so bloody scary, and so critical to everything that happens next. Folks, if you haven't realized by now, most of you probably have, unless you're sleeping under a rock, we are now in a completely different timeline. The world will never be the same again. As we began this stream by saying, it is now in little doubt that the world hitherto was run by a bunch of parasites who, as we said, were basically engaging in compromat in exchange for control. We're just going to bring that up for you again so you can see exactly what we say on that, just to remind everybody that this stream is pretty much now demonstrating the fact that the world will never be the same again, because what is on your screens now may have sounded like absolutely crazy conspiracy bunk even only 2 years ago when we were labeled as such for speaking in these terms. But now in February 2026, it is pretty much established orthodox doctrine to accept what this says as follows: we are ruled over by a class of pathetic parasites who are easily controlled through compromat and blackmail by a global cabal of psychopaths who facilitate their depravity in exchange for control. Every one of them will be exposed. We are coming. That was written on the 10th of April 2023, and so far so good, folks. That is pretty much what it looks like. So keep this in mind as we go through the fact of how Mandelson acted as a conduit for Epstein, giving him access to various prime ministers and also inside information as it pertains to the British government. Now, we've demonstrated that Mandelson was the one that introduced Epstein to Prime Minister Tony Blair while he was in office. But it isn't just Tony Blair. After Tony Blair, the next prime minister to come in to the UK was Gordon Brown. Now, I'm Gen X, all right? Born in 77, and therefore that makes me 48 years old. We remember when Blair left office, and we remember the prime minister that took over after him, Gordon Brown, Flash Gordon. Also met him, also advised him on extremism, just as I advised Blair on extremism. Now, Gordon Brown was known at the time not to be close to Blair, and in fact, not to see eye to eye with Blair on many matters. Now, not least, for example, his foreign policy. Now, keep in mind that it was Mandelson who made Blair and who acted as the chief spin doctor and enforcer for Blair. So when Gordon Brown comes into power, is it any surprise then that Mandelson appears in the same communication that he was having with Epstein about Blair, suddenly now talking about Brown, saying he wants to berid him from the office. He wants to see the back of him. And the reason is because, of course, Brown wasn't Mandelson's man. Blair was. And in a bitter power struggle that lasted many years, those of you who remember it will remember it, Blair and Brown weren't getting on. Blair eventually agreed to stand down. Brown took his place as prime minister. That wasn't to Mandelson's liking. What does Mandelson do? He starts talking to Epstein about how he doesn't like Prime Minister Gordon Brown. That's on your screens now, as reported by the Guido political blog in the UK, a well-established political blog. We're going to blow it up for you so you can see exactly how Mandelson then started talking about a prime minister he didn't control, as opposed to one that he did have insider information on. When corresponding with Epstein, this is what Mandelson said of Brown. He said, as Guido Fawkes reports on the 3rd of February 2026, Mandelson would never have been in a position to forward market-sensitive information to sick pedo friend Jeffrey Epstein without the patronage of certain former prime ministers. Gordon Brown brought Mandelson back to cabinet in one of his major comebacks. And now, Brown is trying to get the scandal off him as quickly as possible. His office issued a statement yesterday calling for a police inquiry into Mandelson's leaks. In at least one email forwarded to Epstein, an email address for John Pond was in copy. The Guardian, its own extensive support for Mandelson over the years, is notable. Reports it, quote, understands was the code name used by advisors when forwarding to Brown's secure email account. Code name? This doesn't make sense. Brown was the first PM who used email extensively for his email red box. And he was directly emailed notes from his team all the time. His senior officials and advisors all had his official email address. Multiple former officials have confirmed to Guido that the use of code words under the Brown government, like John Pond, was a tactic to avoid freedom of information laws. Substituting real names like Gordon Brown with code names put any document out of the scope of freedom of information requests. One official recalls it was, quote, common practice in the cabinet. Blair had introduced freedom of information. This is just one thread exposed by the files that bring Labour crashing down. And the key point here is, as well as the fact that Mandelson seemed to have been communicating in code names, and then Mandelson communicates with Epstein and says in advance that he convinces Gordon Brown to step down from office. Keep in mind, Gordon Brown and Blair were famously not friends. There was a years-long power struggle. Mandelson convinces Gordon Brown to step down from office and informs Epstein of the fact that Brown is stepping down a whole day in advance. This is confidential government information being sent to a man that turns out to have been a convicted paedophile, who no doubt at the time was getting this information from Mandelson, was engaged in the very criminal activities that we subsequently discovered about him. So that's how Brown behaved with, Mandelson behaved with Brown. But the real point of today's stream is to get to this point here where we are now, to bring you to the details of the relationship that exists between Lord Peter Mandelson, the disgraced, the Dark Prince, and our current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, because that is the issue as to which way this story has to move. And it has to move in the direction of Keir Starmer and him being held accountable for why he promoted Mandelson to these positions with no shame, despite the fact that Mandelson did not clear his security clearance, and Keir Starmer knew that and yet continued to promote Mandelson. So what did Mandelson have over Keir Starmer? Well, let's begin with this, and that is what we're going to put on your screens is news of the fact that MI6 refused to clear Mandelson, and despite that, Starmer promoted Mandelson. So here's news reported in the Independent newspaper. You should be able to see that on your screens, and we're going to blow it up for you as well. And it says, Independent reports 12th of September 2025, headline, concerns Mandelson did not pass MI6 vetting for US ambassador role, but Starmer appointed him anyway. MI6, of course, being SIS now, the Secret Intelligence Service of the United Kingdom. On your screens now in the Independent, dated the 12th of September 2025, there's the headline, concerns Mandelson did not pass MI6 vetting for US ambassadorial role, but Starmer appointed him anyway. And we're going to read from that article and it says, serious concerns have been raised that newly sacked US Ambassador Peter Mandelson did not clear security vetting for the role, but the Prime Minister pushed through his appointment anyway. Sources have told The Independent that MI6 failed to clear the Labour peer, largely because of concerns over his business links to China. However, there were also worries that his past links to the disgraced financier and convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein would compromise him. So it's very clear what was going on. MI6 refused to approve of Mandelson's appointment. So why on earth, if that's the case, did Mandelson continue to do the following? And we're going to show you what happened. And we've said here in this Radical Dispatch that we wrote at the time, we're just going to show you the wording of it. So what do they have on PM Keir Starmer such that he remained loyal to Lord Mandelson right up until the day before his departure from post in Washington, D.C., even as Mandelson had admitted his Epstein friendship in his vetting interview? So let's get this straight. MI6 didn't approve security clearance for Mandelson. Mandelson, in his vetting interview, admits to his relationship with Epstein, and Starmer still appoints him as our ambassador to Washington, D.C. That shouldn't just strike you as curious. It should, as it does to us, announce to you in alarming tones and with red flags that there is something over Starmer that makes him unable to say no to Mandelson, despite everybody else around him saying no. Now, you can see there from the Times on the 10th of September 2025, headlined, Mandelson apologizes for embarrassing Epstein birthday letter. And in that article is the quote that we're putting up on your screens now. And it says from the Times, on Tuesday, Downing Street defended Mandelson and said that Starmer still had confidence in his ambassador. That was a day before Mandelson stood down. So Starmer, right up until the day before, was defending Mandelson. Why? What did Mandelson have over Starmer that made Starmer unable to criticize him, but instead do his bidding, do everything that he was told to by Mandelson, including promoting him to ambassador to Washington, D.C., even though MI6 had not cleared him? Now, it gets weirder. So continuing in the evidence that we've put in our previous dispatches, we just read it for you. It says, for 2 years prior, and despite being asked multiple times by journalists, Starmer had refused to abandon Mandelson. Why? And again, we're going to blow this up on your screens for you, because the Telegraph reported on the 21st of June 2023. You can see the headline there. Sir Keir Starmer won't freeze out Mandelson over Epstein friendship. Subheading, JP Morgan report suggests that the Labour peer stayed at Epstein's Manhattan townhouse in 2009 while the billionaire was in prison. And it says, Sir Keir Starmer, this is a quote from the article now, and we can blow it up on your screens there. You can see it. Sir Keir Starmer will continue receiving advice from Lord Mandelson despite accusations he maintained a friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. So again, even in 2023, Starmer knew, and Starmer refused to abandon Epstein, refused to remove him as an official advisor to the Labour Party. And now we want to explore the reasons why. What is it that Starmer had that made him unable to say no to Epstein, that made him unable to refuse requests from Mandelson, we should say, not Epstein? What is it that Mandelson had over Starmer? Well, this is where we want to point you to Starmer's own historic role in cases relating to sexual exploitation and abuse of underage girls, and his own failings in this regard. And we want to suggest that perhaps Mandelson and Starmer have a lot more to hide than is truly being let on. Let's go to looking at some of this evidence so you can understand exactly why Mandelson appears to have had Starmer beholden to his wishes. And have a look at the Sun newspaper headline from June 2020, which is on your screens now. And it says, Sir Keir Starmer and the Jimmy Savile scandal. What was Labour leaders' involvement as head of public prosecutions? Now, for our American readers and listeners, if you don't know who Jimmy Savile is, then just imagine in shorthand the following. Imagine there was a British Epstein. That was Jimmy Savile. He's dead now, but he was a knight of the realm. He was Sir Jimmy Savile, and he was friends with the then Crown Prince, now King Charles. They were best friends. And Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions. Sir Jimmy Savile used to work for the BBC as a children's host. You couldn't make it up. As a children's host in the days of Jim'll Fix It. It was a show that would facilitate the dreams and wishes of children through Jimmy Savile, and live on TV, facilitate those dreams for those children. A lot of them were sick and unwell children that it was subsequently revealed, trigger warning, graphic detail, it was subsequently revealed that Britain's most notorious paedophile, Sir Jimmy Savile, was also sexually abusing and raping those disabled children, including in hospitals. So this Jimmy Savile, who was Britain's most notorious paedophile, was never brought to justice during his lifetime, even though by the end of his life, it became an open secret that this is what he was involved in. Now, when Keir Starmer, before being Prime Minister, one of the key positions he had was as Director of Public Prosecutions. And this Sun headline from newspaper headline from 2020 states, Sir Keir Starmer and the Jimmy Savile scandal, what was Labour leaders' involvement as head of public prosecutions? And we're just going to read from our own Radical Dispatch that published that for you there. And again, all of these receipts will be in the written version tomorrow. We've said when Prime Minister, and among his many mistakes, Boris Johnson himself challenged Starmer on his earlier role as Director of Public Prosecutions for choosing not to prosecute Britain's most notorious paedophile and personal friend of King Charles, Sir Jimmy Savile. Now, we're going to show you exactly what Boris Johnson, when Prime Minister, said about Keir Starmer's relationship to Jimmy Savile and his failure to prosecute him. At the time, this was ridiculed. Now, in 2026, it makes a lot more sense.
This leader of the opposition, a former Director of Public Prosecutions, Mr. Speaker, he spent most of his time prosecuting journalists and failing to prosecute Jimmy Savile, as far as I can make out, Mr. Speaker. He, Mr. Speaker, chose to use this moment. He used this moment, Mr. Speaker, continually to prejudge a police inquiry. That's what he chose to do. He's reached his conclusions about it. I'm not going to reach any conclusions, and he would be entirely wrong to do so.
You can see there clearly that's Boris Johnson, and he is making that accusation directly against Keir Starmer. While Keir Starmer was leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer wasn't happy with that accusation. But that's Boris Johnson as Prime Minister directly saying, you as DPP, Director of Public Prosecutions, head of the Crown Prosecution Service, failed to bring any charges against Britain's most notorious paedophile, Sir Jimmy Savile, even though it was known at the time. That's exactly what Sir Jimmy Savile was about. But it doesn't stop there, folks. Keir Starmer, again, as Prime Minister, did the following, and that's on your screens now, and you should be able to see it, and that is that Keir Starmer, the same Keir Starmer that whipped every single one of his MPs to vote against the UK underage rape grooming gangs inquiry. Yes, you heard that correctly. As reported by GB Politics online, Keir Starmer has made it compulsory for Labour MPs to vote against a national inquiry tomorrow. They will lose the whip otherwise, and that's a national inquiry into the British scandal of underage rape grooming gangs involving mostly British Pakistani Muslim men in the northern cities that Elon Musk attempted to weaponize in his own campaign to interfere in British politics. Again, Musk is named in the Epstein files, and we'll publish exactly how in tomorrow's Radical Dispatch. For the moment, suffice to say that underage rape grooming gang scandal, Keir Starmer as Prime Minister whipped every single one of his MPs. Whipped means that he told every single one of his MPs that if they did not vote against that inquiry, they would lose their membership of the Labour Party and would no longer be able to represent Labour in Parliament and would probably therefore not win the next election. So he whipped them all to vote against the inquiry into underage rape grooming gangs. We reported on that at the time, on the 8th of January. That's on your screens now. Demand a national inquiry. Systemic underage rape grooming gang scandal rocks UK establishment. And of course, the Times then, also January 2025, on your screens now, reported that. We're going to show you what that headline says. What is the grooming gang scandal and how does Starmer fit in? Times reports 6th of Jan 2025, the Prime Minister was in charge of the Crown Prosecution Service when the Times exposed a conspiracy of silence around on-street grooming among police, councils and prosecutors in 2011. The Labour leader has used his time as Director of Public Prosecutions to his political advantage several times. So this is where Starmer is at his weakest, whether it's failing to prosecute Sir Jimmy Savile while he was the Director of Public Prosecutions, or it's indeed failing to prosecute some key grooming gang cases for which Keir Starmer, as Director of Public Prosecutions, was responsible for doing, and he didn't do so. So these raise questions as to exactly why he appears to be so close to Mandelson and continue to promote him without any regard for Mandelson's very, very sketchy relationships. When we asked what is it that Mandelson had over Keir Starmer, these are some of the factors that must be considered. And to continue, it wasn't just Boris Johnson who raised such matters, but even former police detective who was investigating the grooming gang scandal, Maggie Oliver, on GB News raised this issue of Starmer failing to prosecute a grooming gang scandal, and that should be on your screens now. As you can see, GB News reports when Keir Starmer was DP, he made the decision alongside the prosecutors that a man who got a 13-year-old girl pregnant didn't face charges of rape. And here is the video of former police detective and now whistleblower Maggie Oliver levying that very accusation against Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Have a look at this.
I shouldn't have had to resign. It's still, 12 years on from that day, and we're still going round the same.
See Keir Starmer stand up in the House of Commons and issue you a full and unreserved apology, don't we?
You know what, Bev? Empty words mean nothing to me. I want to see him put his actions where his mouth is. Blaming this problem on far-right extremists is actually dodging the issue. He was the Director of Public Prosecutions when I resigned from Rochdale. And I resigned because the charges that were being levelled at the predators and the abusers of those men, I knew in detail. I knew what had happened to them because I've spoken to them all. Being threatened at gunpoint, being passed around a room like a ball, being raped on a daily basis. And he made the decision alongside the prosecutors that the man who got a 13-year-old pregnant didn't face charges of rape. He was out of prison in less than 4 years. As a tactical option, they put a child victim of that gang on the indictment so they could get her evidence into court without even telling her. Then they tried to take her children away from her. He was the DPP. And I'm sorry, when he says that his record is clear and good, I would take him straight back to that case, which 10 years later, Bev, the Chief Constable of Manchester has publicly acknowledged was borderline incompetence in the handling of it on many levels. And to this day, the CPS refused to apologise for putting that victim on the indictment as a purely tactical option. So we still have a long, long way to go. And so, words like yesterday, they can, again, actually are blaming victims and abuse victims for standing up for their right to have their abusers tackled and dealt with properly. It's smoke and mirrors, and I've heard these things so many times that I get really angry about it.
Yeah, well, so you should, and thank goodness for your anger, Maggie, because it keeps it driving forward, and we appreciate all the work that you do. Maggie Oliver there.
Now, that, by the way, folks, was from a couple of years ago, and there was former police detective Maggie Oliver making it clear that Keir Starmer, as Director of Public Prosecutions, refused to prosecute in an key underage rape grooming gang case where a 13-year-old got pregnant by being raped, and DPP Starmer did not prosecute, like Boris Johnson's accusation that DPP Starmer did not prosecute against Jimmy Savile. Why does, and this really is the key question here that by now you should be able to see where I'm going with this. Why does Prime Minister Keir Starmer appear to be so hesitant to go against the wishes of sexual predators? Why did he appear to be so hesitant to prosecute Britain's most notorious paedophile, Sir Jimmy Savile? Why did he appear to be so hesitant to prosecute the key grooming gang underage rape scandal in Rotherham? Why did he appear to be so hesitant to say no to Lord Mandelson, a key Epstein friend who was leaking private government information to Epstein? What is it with Keir Starmer and cases involving sexual predation and sexual exploitation and underage rape? Why does he appear impotent to do anything about them? We've seen a pattern developing, and that pattern, to our logical minds, can only be explained by the fact that it could well be highly likely that they've got something on Keir Starmer too. This man needs to resign. That is the only option. He must go. He must. And by the way, that doesn't mean there'll be a general election, because it may well be the Labour Party gets rid of him and brings in another one of their own. But nevertheless, that means Labour goes into the May elections under a new leader, and that means the issue is kept alive, because the public, we are sure, will be rightfully outraged at these revelations and will demand that all of the Labour leadership is held to account for these shenanigans. So the fact that Keir Starmer is still in position is unsustainable. It can no longer be tolerated. And we, by the way, had tied all of this together for everybody back in February 2025 last year on GB News. We're going to show you that now. It's worth repeating. As we sat with GB News' Neil Oliver, this is what we said about the relationship between Starmer and his inability to prosecute cases involving sexual exploitation and underage rape. And we raised this question then. What exactly did they have on Starmer? Take a listen to this.
Are only one element, and that's why we immediately said this was a cover-up. Don't just talk about the street-level gangs. They are organized gangs who have their connections in the police, the social services, the local councils, all the way up through the national political hierarchy of the Labour Party. Now, since we said that, it all came out. We were pointing at the time to Lord Ahmed's conviction for underage sex abuse. He was a Labour peer from Rotherham, which was a trigger case for these grooming gangs. Now, that's from right at the top. We were also pointing to Keir Starmer's decision to appoint Peter Mandelson as his ambassador to the US. Mandelson, the same guy, without a doubt, on record, in released court documents, is proven to have visited Epstein's island, to have gone to Epstein's mansion in New York, and to have gone to Paris for his birthday. Close friend of Epstein. More so than even Prince Andrew, right? There's more information on Mandelson's relationship with him than there even was with Prince Andrew. So why was Starmer, look at how Prince Andrew was treated, why was Starmer rewarding Mandelson with the most diplomatic appointment on the planet for Britain, which is to America, right? Granting him diplomatic immunity is what it was about. So that's how far up the rock goes, right to the top with Lord Ahmed and Peter Mandelson. By the way, both Labour and both from the Blair era. Mandelson was Blair's dark prince who had all the dirt on all of the politicians, and that's how he kept them in line. It's why he was called the Dark Prince. Where do you think he got that dirt from, if not Epstein, right? So that's what was going on. Since we said all of that, what got revealed? Well, there was a Labour former defence minister who got arrested in a sting for attempting to solicit sexual favours from an underage boy. And then 2 police officers got arrested in Rotherham for being involved as well. This all came out after the scandal was recently resurrected by Musk, proving that this is bigger, as you just said, Neil, than the mere street gang level. And it's not just Pakistanis. This thing is a rot that goes through the system and is actually what people used to refer to as a conspiracy theory. It's the global VIP paedophile ring that used to be run by Epstein, which is an acknowledged Mossad operation.
And that was a video from a year ago on GB News with Neil Oliver, February, a year ago, 2025. We laid it all out there for you, and you can see now pretty much how a year later that's all effectively come to pass. As we laid out there, that's what it appears to be the case. And therefore, Starmer has a great deal to answer for. There's one thing we'll say on this, and that is that don't let them take any credit for the grooming gangs situation. As we hope is clear by now, Starmer acted to contain that story, not to prosecute it. So the political appointment that was Starmer's prosecutor in the grooming gangs was a northern British Pakistani lad named Nazir Afzal, and he that should be on your screens now, his post. He's now trying to proffer advice on the Epstein case, and we just felt it's appropriate to tell everybody to be wary. Here he is, Nazir Afzal, on your screens. He was Starmer's prosecutor for the Crown Prosecution Service on the grooming gangs scandal. And there he is saying they have names, flight logs, visitors, videos, photos, sworn statements. They have evidence. They've only released half the files because the rest is so terrible. Only a woman has been prosecuted. These billionaires think you're stupid. Prosecute the predators. # Epstein files. You can see the date there, 1st of Feb 2026. But what we've said in response to that is there on your screens now. Sit down. You were literally a political appointee prosecutor for Keir Starmer, who, as Director of Crown Prosecutions, the CPS, failed to prosecute Britain's most notorious paedophile, Sir Jimmy Savile, and shut down a key underage rape grooming gang case despite the suspect's DNA being found on the victim's underwear. And then, after all that, he appointed Epstein suspect Lord Manderson as our ambassador to the US. If you want further information as to exactly how Starmer's prosecutor Nazir Afzal, who's now seeking to proffer advice on the Epstein case, the brass neck of it, if you want further information as to how he and others were involved in that containment operation on behalf of Starmer, we reported on all of that on the 22nd of October 2025 in the Radical Dispatch. And you can see there, section 4, that's on your screens now. It says Prosecutor Nazir Afzal and the cover-up. That would all, again, be republished for you in tomorrow's Radical Dispatch. So in keeping in line with the theme that this is a bigger problem and that all of these problems are connected through Epstein and Mandelson, again, as this news broke, we were faced with yet another scandal of a Labour MP being suspended and rearrested on suspicion of rape, in addition to past previous arrest for child abduction. That's as reported by Sky News yesterday. There is the Labour MP, Dan Norris, and we're just going to play this clip for you as well so you can see exactly what he's been accused of.
Sky News understands that a man in his 60s that the network believes to be the MP Dan Norris has been further arrested on suspicion of rape, sexual assault, voyeurism and upskirting. This is following a statement published by Avon and Somerset Police that said that an investigation into allegations of non-recent sexual offences that resulted in the arrest of a man in his 60s is continuing. The man initially arrested in April 2025 on suspicion of sexual offences against a girl, rape, child abduction and misconduct in a public office. Well, this statement goes on to say, following inquiries, the man has been further arrested on suspicion of rape against a second woman, sexual assault against a third woman, as well as voyeurism and upskirting against a number of women. We're no longer actively investigating any sexual offences against children, but the original rape and misconduct in public office investigation is continuing. All offences are alleged to have occurred between the 2000s and 2020s. It goes on to say, Avon and Somerset Police's statement that investigations are sensitive and complex and as a result can take a significant amount of time for inquiries to be completed. The man remains on conditional bail. Well, like I say, this is the development that a man in his 60s, which Sky News understands to be the MP Dan Norris, has been further arrested on suspicion of rape, sexual assault, voyeurism and upskirting. This is following a statement given to us briefly a short while ago by Avon and Somerset Police. Dan Norris, the MP, was suspended from the Labour Party in April, hasn't attended Parliament since his release on police bail 9 months ago. he says that he continues to represent constituents and that is continuing to ask parliamentary questions, although there is petitions calling for him to be replaced. But like I say, he remains on conditional bail and has been arrested on suspicion of rape, sexual assault, voyeurism, upskirting. Like I say, the man in his 60s, we understand in this case that's being referred to be the MP Dan Norris. Further details on that, we'll bring them to you here on Sky News.
So it is obvious by now that this is a wider problem than any one element. This is an endemic problem in the Labour Party, but beyond the Labour Party as well. It's a transatlantic problem. In fact, this is a Epstein coordinated global operation for acquiring compromat on politicians and celebrities and billionaires in order to force them to do the biddings of the people that are their handlers. And their handlers clearly via Mandelson ended up becoming Epstein, who was working on behalf of Mossad. And that is why we've explained events in the way that we have on your screens, which we're going to show you now, demonstrating that such compromat is in fact a condition for entry. So somebody asked here, Cody Sanchez on online asked, can someone please explain to me why these super rich men are all pedos? You're a billionaire. Why can't you just date and have relations with any gorgeous woman? And we've tried to demonstrate actually what's going on here with the following reply. You're getting it the wrong way around, we've said. Compromat is a condition for entry. Billionaires don't become pedophiles. They were already willing to do this shit on camera, and that's why they were permitted to become billionaires in the first place. It's called selling your soul to the devil. So that's our response to that. This is an operation, and as such, compromat is a condition for entry. We've explained this in Radical Media on the 3rd of April 2024. That's on your screens now. A global blackmail operation to serve Mossad's global war machine in a global palace coup. That was explained as far back as the 3rd of April 2024 for everybody. And as you can see here, even the Daily Mail, in its headline, which is on your screens now, makes it very clear. Epstein list reignites suspicion. The pedo financier was working for the Mossad and blackmailing the elite with help of information he gleaned from useful idiot Prince Andrew after meeting Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak at least 36 times. That's in the Daily Mail from the 4th of January 2024. And that's why it's quite absurd for the Daily Mail this time around, 31st of January, as you can see on your screens now, to suggest it was a KGB operation when even they themselves had previously suggested that this was a Mossad-run blackmail operation. But just to leave no room for doubt, this round of leaks has actually exposed Epstein discussing with the Israeli Prime Minister and talking about who he's going to introduce him to put him on which board of which companies to help his influence in the US. And in the course of doing so, he names Peter Thiel and Palantir. You should be able to see on your screens now from Drop Site News by Ryan Grimm. As Ehud Barak was leaving official government service in Israel, he turned to Jeffrey Epstein for guidance. Epstein told him he needed to look at a Peter Thiel company called Palantir. Rare audio of Epstein and Barak from the latest DOJ release. So we'll place that audio in the dispatch for you tomorrow as well. So you'll all be able to hear that and it will demonstrate clearly what this operation was. It was a blackmail operation and of course all of the others involved. The key thing to realize, and we're going to end on this note, is why is blackmail what is leverage in blackmail and why is it so important for the blackmail to be released? Well, upon releasing blackmail, what you do is you remove the leverage. And that's why we've put here, again, this will be revealed for you tomorrow in the written version of this dispatch as well. But we have written here from that previous dispatch in 2024, entitled A Global Blackmail Operation to Serve Mossad's Global War Machine in a Global Palace Coup. What we've written, blackmail only works if the compromat is not yet made public. It is the threat of making such compromat public that provides leverage to the blackmailer. If the information is already out there, the blackmailer has lost all power because there is no leverage. This is why, so on that note, by the way, that's why it's important for such information to be out there, because by putting these names and all of this information out there, you remove the leverage from the blackmailer, and that's how you remove the power that the blackmailer has over the target. Now, to tie that all up for you, why this is all coming out now as it is because We will not enter war. In fact, we will enter peace. The blackmail is what was being used to force prime ministers to go to war against the interests of their own country. By removing that leverage in the blackmail, the blackmailer is no longer able to coerce politicians to go to war against the interests of their own country. And on that note, we will conclude with what is on your screens now to explain and tie together everything you see unfolding, because it can appear quite confusing to the uninitiated eye. But actually, to those of you who are regulars who've been following, it should be no longer any mystery as to what's going on. And as it says quite clearly on your screens now, we end on this point because we've already gone over an hour and 20 minutes in this stream that is usually an hour long. This, we've said, is basically the live takedown of the world's most powerful globalist criminal cartel by none other than God, who is the greatest. Hashtag nothing can stop what is coming. And there on your screens is a sign, the symbol of the Punisher, on a camo background, desert camo, with the words toxic masculinity exists, just ask Ghislaine Maxwell. The key thing to remember, folks, is that Ghislaine Maxwell is still alive. She remains the only person convicted over this affair, even though she isn't one of the clients, but appears to have been a madam. And yet none of the clients, those who paid Epstein to have sex with underage boys and girls on his island, none of those clients have been brought to justice. And what you're witnessing is a live takedown of that globalist criminal cartel that was involved in blackmailing people of influence so that they could coerce them to do their bidding. And one of the ways to remove the sting and power of blackmail is to remove the leverage, and that is by publishing all of this information so that the blackmailer no longer has leverage when it comes to being able to coerce people of influence to do their bidding. And that brings us squarely back to the start of this stream. And as you can see from the political cartoon that we've used, not one single person who paid to rape children on Epstein's island has been arrested. And that's clearly what needs to happen next. And as we said at the start, we end on this note that the two princes, the former Prince Andrew Mountbatten and the Dark Prince Lord Mandelson, have both fallen. The Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is next. That's all we've got time for this live stream, Warrior Creed live stream. You can go to the Radical Dispatch tomorrow for the written version of this stream, wherein we will publish all the receipts and more from everything you've heard today. We will say that behind the paywall for premium subscribers on majidnawaz.substack.com, you'll be able to access further information such as databases, searchable databases, in order to be able to corroborate any name that you would like when it comes to all of the information related to Epstein, including flight logs, Epstein's calendar, his visitors to his island, visitors to his mansions, through mobile tracking data. 200 mobile phones have been confirmed by a Wired investigation, as reported by the London Times, to have visited Jeffrey Epstein's paedophile island. And the data as to those mobile phones goes from their homes all the way to the island. It is known who they are. That's 200 at least who visited the island. The ability to corroborate all of that information will publish behind the paywall in tomorrow's Radical Dispatch, but the written version of this stream, insofar as what we've said in the Warrior Creed stream, will be free for everybody. The podcast version of this stream will again be behind the paywall for our premium subscribers. We thank our premium subscribers. Without your premium subscription, we cannot continue this investigative work. And look how far we've come. People only a year ago would have called us insane, and yet look at where the world is now. We are, folks, in a completely different timeline. Vindication is an understatement. The world will not be the same. In fact, we have said it before, we'll say it again. We have successfully, God willing, avoided World War III. And these revelations are a part of that because of the removal of leverage, as we've explained. And this will not be the last story you see on this Epstein saga. This is indeed one of the greatest political scandals in history. And you heard it here first on Radical Media. And with that, we say all praise is to God. Until next time, you've been listening to The Radical for the Warrior Creed livestream.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength Public service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.